You're an agribusiness executive navigating an increasingly competitive market while trying to grow your company. Mergers and acquisitions are pitched as an accelerant to growth, but many M&A deals destroy more value than they create. Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches for successful mergers and acquisitions. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosier.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pacesetter Pod. This show is dedicated to helping you, the leader of a small to middle market food or agribusiness firm, navigate the challenges of driving growth through mergers and acquisitions. We want to help you de-risk your strategy and strengthen your M&A readiness to produce better results in less time and with less disruption. I am Joe Mosier, founder and principal advisor of the Mosier Consulting Group, and I really appreciate you joining us today. Imagine for a moment jumping way ahead in the M&A journey to the integration finish line. The big idea I want to leave you with today is this: there is more to closing your integration than completing the tasks. When you successfully execute a merger or acquisition as a small or middle market business, it's fundamentally transformative for your company. You no longer have the same business. You are stronger now, and that's not only because of the strength of being a larger company and what you accomplished, because of what you learned. It's a really challenging time, and so you've learned what you did well. You know where you struggled, and you have a very clear view on where you have room to improve. You're also tired and fatigued, but ultimately you see your business with new eyes and a new perspective that appreciates that incredible potential that you demonstrated as you navigated through all the work and demands of the integration process. At this point, you're also armed with a whole slate of new opportunities available to strengthen your business. And so this moment, when integration activities feel like they're coming to a close, is really critical. It's a point at which you can keep up the momentum and capture all that value that's newly available within your organization, or you can slip back into old habits, but do it now with a larger business. It's a chance to be smart about picking off the next opportunities that have come into your view, or you can put your head down and get back to business as usual as quickly as you can. In our process, Integration Pacesetter, we call this final stage of the work sustain and optimize. And it's important to have a way to officially close your integration while ensuring that you're ready to sustain the gains and defend all the progress that you made, and launch a plan to continue the work of improving your business. So today we're going to introduce the 5 criteria that we use to ensure that it is in fact time to close your integration. Let me use a metaphor here, but this is about safely getting the plane on the ground and getting you as a passenger on your journey. So what do you need to end your journey? You need a runway assignment. You need to be cleared for landing. You need everyone in their seats with their seatbelts fastened and their tray tables in the upright and locked position. But once you're on the ground, the journey's not over. You need to make sure your plane has a gate assignment. You're going to need grounds crew to guide you in, and you're going to need to be able to deplane onto the jet bridge. And so really the right way to close integration is much like finally getting off the plane and knowing where to collect your baggage and finding your vehicle in the parking ramp and really navigating your way home. And so let's jump in and walk through the 5 criteria that help you do this properly. The first criteria, and we do these in the form of questions. So 5 criteria or 5 questions. The first one is handoff complete? And this is about countering what I call the whimper effect, where it feels like integration is over because we don't really talk about it anymore. We don't really have that many meetings. Most of the work streams have finished their work. A lot of the pain is behind us and it's now just become scar tissue. But while if we don't talk about it and it feels like there's not a lot of integration work happening, no one ever actually said that it's over. And so you need to ask some questions here to say, is the handoff complete? Have responsibilities and accountabilities been assigned? Meaning, have we transitioned what was the work of the integration team over to routine operations, and the department heads and the people within the business need to run that work? Has training been provided to everybody that needs it? Do they know what they need to do, and have they been trained to be able to do it? And have procedures and job aids been made available? Have we equipped people to be able to be successful in their roles and do the work the way that we want them to do the work once the training is over, once the integration is closed, and once things are back up and running as in the new normal? So when you think about it this way, when you install new equipment in a facility, there's a commissioning process, or there should be a commissioning process. And that's there to ensure that the equipment is working properly. And you have an in-service date assigned when operations has assumed control of that equipment. Or similarly, with an IT system implementation, there's user acceptance testing. Is this software understood and accessible and usable by the staff that need it? And then even after the training, there's a period of hypercare where you go through while things stabilize. And those same kind of principles apply here. So knocking off the tasks in your plan, in your integration plan, only equals being done if those tasks included ensuring that the business is ready to assume control of the processes and all the systems that you've integrated. And many times integration plans don't explicitly call that out. So this is a really important question to ask. Is the handoff complete? Do people know what they need to do? Have they been trained in how to do it? And have we provided the resources to help them be successful? The second question or criteria is this. Do we have the reports we need? And so while we're really talking about the reports we need, it's really the operating and management information. So when the first item, handoff, or where the first item is about ensuring that the people who run the processes are ready to assume control, the second here is about ensuring that the ability to monitor performance of those processes and the businesses in place. You might know for certain that the plane has been refueled while you're sitting at the gate, but you would never push back and start taxiing to the runway if the fuel gauge was not functioning properly. And so that's why we want to make sure that we have the instrumentation properly calibrated, properly functioning, giving us the information we need. So here in this second set of criteria, we look at these kinds of questions. We think about, do we know what we actually want to measure and monitor? And if we know we want to measure and monitor, do we have the systems and processes in place to do so? And if we know we want to measure and we have the systems and processes in place, do the people who need it have it? And so that's really what you need to be asking yourselves is, in addition to the handoff, the people that need to understand how to monitor the performance, has that capability been established? And many times in the fog of integration, that kind of work of establishing the steady state reporting is missed, or it's de-emphasized, or becomes an afterthought. And what you want to do is you want to solve it at the point of closure of integration, not leave it to the department heads, the managers, the team leads to sort out once integration is over. The third criteria we ask is, what do we want to do in the near term? And so let's stick with the air travel analogy here. So getting off the plane is hardly the end of the journey. So as I mentioned earlier, you get off the plane, you need to check gate monitors for your connecting flight information. Or you may need signage that's going to direct you to the baggage claim. Or you may be looking for information on how to find ground transportation for a ride share or for a hotel shuttle, or maybe where the parking ramp is, or if there's a tram or a train into town. And the message here is that there's residual work that needs to be done and cleaned up as you officially put the integration to bed and you get back to that work of running your business. And so here we ask these kinds of questions with our clients. During the integration, based on what we've learned, have we agreed on what those near-term priorities are? And for those near-term priorities, do we have a plan established? And do we know who's responsible for that plan? And so this has been a little bit vague, so if it helps, let me provide a couple of examples here. So one example is a company that had agreed to, after their integration, after the completion of the work, they knew that they needed to do some capacity balancing across their complex of facilities. And they needed to do this capacity balancing in order to bring supply and demand of their warehouse and storage space into balance, because they knew as a result of the integration that they now had excess capacity beyond what they reasonably need, and certainly beyond what they wanted to incur the cost to maintain and operate. So technically, this is certainly related to integration, because the integration is what introduced the additional capacity into the business. But given that this specific aspect of capacity balancing was going to occur over a slightly longer period of time, the steering team had determined that it was better to roll this into its own smaller project. So this would continue post-integration.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
And that's fine if that conscious and informed decision is made. So in order to consider this work done from an integration standpoint, the team had determined a couple of things. First, they agreed capacity balancing is a need. We're not finishing during integration. We're finishing it as part of a separate project. They determined who was going to lead the work. And then they also talked about what was the capacity balancing bogey or the target, meaning how many bushels of storage did they think they needed to mothball or take out of service in order to bring their likely origination volume, the demand, into alignment with the supply, with the acceptable amount of excess capacity. And then they also started talking about, okay, before we start doing that work, what's the criteria for identifying the potential locations that were going to be closed or put out of service? So this was things like, are we trying to remove seasonal elevators, or are we open to taking full-time sites offline? Do we have any full-time sites that are directly competing? It doesn't make sense to operate two of them that are a couple miles apart. Were we looking to remove locations that had rail access, or did we want to focus on truck houses only? How do we want to manage the impact on staff? Were we trying to reassign people to other locations where more volume was going to flow to now, or we're going to pursue layoffs? So that was the kind of criteria that was established. And so I hope you get the idea of saying, okay, capacity balancing, we're going to do that after integration. That's a fine decision, but it's not complete until you've answered some of those questions about what's the objective, what's the plan, who's in charge, and then some of these qualifying questions like criteria, targets, etc. So this is really about having a plan in place to address those near-term or urgent items that are derived from your integration that either create value or manage risk, and they're generally limited in scope, and usually they're able to be addressed by maybe not an individual, but a relatively small team. So that brings us to number 4. So where number 3 was, what do we do in the near term? Number 4 is about what do we do in the long term? One of the long tail benefits of post M&A integration when it's done well is that you get a comprehensive view of your organization's strengths, as well as the focus areas or maybe the investments that you're going to need in order to sustain an accelerated pace of growth. So questions that we ask in this area will include, based on what we learned during integration, have we agreed on the longer term priorities? We'll ask, do we have a plan in place for how to pursue those priorities and when we intend to revisit them? So we've agreed it's longer term. What does longer term mean? Some organizations, longer term could mean 90 days out. For others, that is 24 to 36 months. So that's important to be explicit. And again, the question of who is responsible for picking that up post-integration. And so for longer term priorities, these are usually the big, complex, high profile, high impact changes that help you accelerate into the next S curve of growth. And some very common examples, in fact, they're so common that they show up in one form or another in almost any integration that we're a part of, are this. Many times people post-integration, after they've moved people around, if they have a new management team in place, they start to think about revisiting the company's operating model. And by operating model, I mean where and how are decisions made? Are we a centralized organization? Are we decentralized? If we're decentralized, what decision rights are held in the departments or in the locations versus in the corporate office or the centers of expertise? Another one is redesigning the organizational structure. Many companies will try, in my experience, to try to do org design during the integration, and it can work, but generally it has to have a pre-existing vision for what that new organizational structure was going to be. If you're trying to start from scratch and truly envisioning with a blue sky what might the possibilities be in the midst of that first 60, 90, 180 days of integration, it's really hard. And so many times we focus on the rehire process, getting the key staff from the target company on board, getting them in their roles, getting them equipped for success. And then it's in the post-integration phase where maybe you take a fresh look at what is the right organizational structure? What's going to set us up to achieve over the long term the growth objectives that we have? Another really common example is implementing new ERP or enterprise resource planning software. So the big names here would be, the SAPs of the world. But oftentimes you've got two companies that come together. They both have their own software systems in place. Perhaps you decide to run two concurrent systems for a period of time. Perhaps you force the transition in the short term to one. But oftentimes, as the integration has sort of gone on, you may identify that either option you had from the legacy companies wasn't a great fit, and it's time to explore new ERP software. And the last one that I often see is just a general effort to drive more maturity and rigor in business process ownership and management. Integrations are perfectly designed to put pressure and stress on all your processes. And so coming out of these integrations and realizing how much work had to be done to design processes and document processes in flight usually gives renewed interest in this post-acquisition, post-integration. So you're going to touch on most of all these during integration plans. But again, it's often several months post-integration that companies are ready to make, let's say, a sober assessment of where they are against where they want to be. And then they can figure out how they're going to marshal the energy and resources to begin pushing in that direction. And the fifth and final question, this is a really important one, is have we celebrated? And this seems simple, I'm sure, but on the back end of all the work of an M&A transaction and that subsequent integration, it is so easy to overlook this. The integrations wind down, and as they do, there's never really a clean moment to claim victory. And feelings around this time are usually more about relief that the work is done than celebrating what is accomplished. And so even forcing a celebration 9 months, 12 months after the acquisition closed, it might feel forced. But this, in my opinion, is too important for the learning and growth of your people and strength of building the new culture. It's too important to overlook. And so here we look at these kinds of questions. We talk about, has the completion been formally announced? And have we, meaning the entirety of the business, not just the integration team or the management team or the ownership, have we collectively taken credit for the win? Have we rewarded and recognized all the heavy lifters? So in an integration, everybody's impacted and everybody works hard. But you also need to carve out special recognition for those few who really demonstrate the Herculean efforts to get the job done. And depending on the people, depending on your business, this could be public or private recognition. But the point is that recognition is really important. Another question is, have we taken the time to enjoy it? Leaders are in the best position to see the entirety of what was overcome and what was accomplished during the M&A life cycle. It is up to you as a leader to set the tone by taking everyone back to the early days, to talk again about why the deal was important, talk about what work it entailed, talk about what was learned and what the future holds, and do that in order to race forward. And you got to take it a couple steps back. So let's recap. Today, we really dialed in on the fact that completing the tasks in your integration plan is not the same as closing integration. And we highlighted the 5 criteria or questions that you need to ask in order to determine if your integration is in fact complete. And again, those criteria are the handoff to routine operations, reporting and monitoring, near-term plans, long-term plans, and celebration and recognition. So that's all we have for today. I hope that's been valuable to you and provide a different perspective. And next week, we're going to take the conversation in a very different direction. There are 2 really important elements to any organization's ability to execute strategy, including a merger or an acquisition. And those elements are capacity and capability. And it's my opinion that too many people, sometimes myself if I'm not paying attention, will use these terms interchangeably. And we're going to explore the concepts in detail to highlight the differences between capacity and capability. And we're going to talk about what that distinction means for your business and how you lead through growth. We're going to talk about why it's important. This is not just an exercise in semantics. And so while this is incredibly important to, of course, your post-M&A integration success, it can also be broadly applied to other business transformation and strategy efforts that you have. And I really want to arm you with a perspective that helps you evaluate how well or how poorly your organization is positioned from a capacity versus a capability standpoint. So I hope that's interesting to you, and I hope that you choose to join us next week. So that's all for today's episode of the Pacesetter Pod. Please don't forget to hit subscribe on your podcast player, and we'd love for you to leave a review and let us know what you think. In the meantime, please connect and get in touch with me, Joe Mosier, on LinkedIn, or you can visit us online at mosiercg.com and set up a call if you want to explore any of these topics or other things related to M&A further. Thank you always for listening. We love that you chose to spend the time with us today. We never take it for granted, and we hope you have a safe day. Thanks.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.